In this video, we'll talk about 7 most popular Spring interview questions. We'll talk about Spring IOC container, dependency injection, how the proxy in Spring works, how can we inject bean, and different modes of auto-wiring, Spring application context, and parameters to a constructor in Spring. So let's start. First question, what is Spring IOC container? Remember that Spring framework is based on IOC, which stands for inversion of control. So we call Spring as the IOC container. IOC, so the inversion of control, means that the object gives its dependencies instead of creating or looking for dependent objects. So the Spring container, basing on the configuration that you give it to him, instantiates the beans, and the application classes doesn't have to look itself for the classes that they are dependent on, but they give their dependencies to Spring IOC container, which provides them these beans. So central to the Spring framework is its inversion of control container, the IOC container. It provides a configuration and managing of Java objects using the reflection mechanism. So the IOC container is responsible for managing the object life cycles of the beans, creating them, calling the initialization methods, and configuring these objects by wiring them together inside here. So objects created by the container are also called managed objects or beans. Remember this during the interview. What are the benefits of such configuration? We have less code, we have less coupling, and IOC containers support eager initialization and lazy loading of the services. So whenever you start the Spring IOC container, it instantiates all the beans that we will need during our application. First question, how proxy in Spring works? So you can answer this question by using the transactional annotation example. As you can see here, we have a class, the account service implementation, which implements the account service, and we have the transactional annotation on a create method. So remember that whenever you use such annotation, at startup time, a new class, a proxy class, is created for you by Spring. So this class is in charge of adding the transactional behaviors. Yeah? So we have the generated proxy class, which comes on top of the account service implementation that we have here, yeah? And it adds the transactional behavior. So this create method will not be invoked without a transaction on the database. Yeah? So we have the proxy, which also extends from account service, the same as the implementation, and we have the business code inside here. And that's pretty it, yeah? So we have the proxy created by Spring for us, only by using this annotation. Fourth question, what is the dependency injection? So it's like the design pattern which implements the inversion of control pattern. And let's look at the example here, where let's assume that in the client bean B, we need a bean A. So we know that bean A was already constructed. It was lazy constructed during the initialization of the Spring context, so at the very beginning of our application start. So instead of directly coupling both beans, we have the bean A injected directly into the bean B using the bean container and the configuration of the beans. Yeah? So an injection is a passing of a dependency to a dependent object, to a client that needs such class. So we need a bean A. Yeah? This means that the client doesn't need to know how to construct the service, the bean, and how to inject. So it's loosely coupled. Yeah? So we have also fulfilled the single responsibility principle and inversion of control principle. So these are the main benefits of dependency injection. Fifth question, how can we inject bean into our class using a dependency injection? We have three methods here, a constructor base, setter base, and field base. So which one should I use? So the best one is the constructor base, is best for the required dependencies. Yeah? So we have an example here where we have some class constructor and we want to inject into this constructor some inject service. Yeah? So this is the name of the class. If we want to do this, we annotate the constructor with auto-wired annotation, put inside the constructor body method, we put this service, so it means that this private field will equal the service as from the parameter. Yeah? We can have also the qualifier annotation here if we have a situation when we have two beans returning the same class but with a different name. So the name in this case would be a task executor. Yeah? And we have also the setter possibility to inject bean into our class, but it's more likely used if we want to have an optional dependency. So yes, so we can use it, we can live without it, but if it's optional, you can use inside the setter of the field. So you create a private field and make a setter annotated with auto-wired, and then we inject the inject service, the same as in the constructor. And we also have the field possibility of auto-wiring, but it's not recommended by me. Sixth question, explain different modes of auto-wiring. We have three possibilities. By type, for this type of auto-wiring, a class type is used. And we have a constructor, so this is almost similar to auto-wire by type, but the difference is that the constructor is used to inject the dependency. And we have the last one by name, so for this type we have the setter method used for the dependency injection. Last question, the seventh one, how to inject parameters to a constructor in Spring. Let's look at the example here. Let's assume that we have the application properties file where we store the JDBC URL for our application, and then we want to inject this value to our constructor. Yeah? So we use the value annotation with a special naming inside, like here, JDBC URL. So that's it about Spring 7 most popular interview questions. I hope you enjoyed it.